Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us on siberXchange.ca. When you think about the aspect of mental health and care for an individual, we often have notions around physicality, talking to someone, person to person, being with them, spending time with them. We measure their body language. We understand or seek to understand their thoughts. We attempt to be around them and surround them with care and good health, and give them the necessary services that they need to overcome whatever health barrier they're facing. COVID-19, as all of you know, when Dr. Tedros had announced this to be a pandemic, he made one statement, which all of my guests today, I believe, have taken to heart. And that is, you don't use the word pandemic lightly. Because if you misuse it, it can result in the trade of fear, surveillance, and more importantly, inaction. The session today, coming to you live from the beautiful St. Francis Center here in the town of Ajax, is made possible by Medha Saraiya from ConnexHealth, Mayor Shaun Collier, Mayor of the town of Ajax, and Todd from the Amanda Todd Legacy Foundation, who has now also joined the board at ConnexHealth. Before we begin, I want to thank Mayor Collier for his vision, and I want to thank him for his support of the community. The land we're gathered on today is the land of the peoples of the Mississaugas of the Scugog Island First Nation. The land is protected under the Williams Treaties, and I'd like to thank Mayor Shaun Collier for making sure that he's collaborated with academe, industry, private and public sector. In a time where most peoples are looking for the light switch, Mayor Collier has made sure that in these dark times, he's found us some light. You know how they say, tough times don't last, but tough people do? My panelists today are such tough people with a soft heart for change, innovation, and caring for people. Our topic today is going to be on the aspect of healthcare, specifically on how, as a result of the pandemic and the crisis that we've been in, we found a silver lining. And we've seen an increase in services, and we've seen, more importantly, an increase of access. Not just volume of services, but access to services. Medha from ConnexHealth will talk in detail about how her company, a startup in the world of digital healthcare, has secured new mechanisms to deliver virtual care, and more importantly, deliver services to those most in need, especially medication delivery. Todd, who all of you know very well, as someone that I look up to, someone who the entire nation, in fact, the entire world looks up to for her strength and her care. She'll be talking to us about what we can now do to address some of the elements of virtual mental health. All of you might remember in siberXchange 1.0, myself, Todd, Farouk Nair, and Senator Salma spoke a great deal about policy as it relates to violence against women online, cyber abuse, and cyberbullying. Today, Carol will be talking about some practical steps we can now take now that we've got the frameworks in place, or at least understood some of the frameworks. There's still more work to be done. And Mayor Collier will talk to us about the lights that he's turned on, the ideas that he's realized in the town of Ajax, and to remind you that Ajax is open for business, open for collaboration, and open to not just listening to reply, but listening to understand. Welcome, Mayor Collier, Carol, and Medha. Mayor Collier, I'm going to begin with you, and more importantly, go to a moment not too long after the pandemic struck. I think it was about 3 weeks or so, once we were in the emergency order, that one of your first elements of action, besides taking care of business and industry practices within Ajax and jobs, you immediately looked at the healthcare of our seniors. You saw it as an opportunity to start a program, Seniors Without Walls, and initiated through technology processes via which our seniors, many of whom had to stay in extreme isolation, could get more connected to services and more connected to community. Why was it important for you to launch a service for seniors specifically? Mayor Collier?
Thanks, Ali, for the great introduction and for that question. First of all, you're giving me too much credit. I have amazing staff, and I have to thank all my staff because they're the ones that actually come up with a lot of the stuff and implement it. But We have a large seniors population and a growing seniors population, and health and wellness of all residents and business was the foremost concern as we navigated this pandemic. I've had it, a lot of people refer to it as, we're building the plane as we fly it. This is unprecedented kind of territory. So with the seniors, again, we just and for all the vulnerable, I'll speak more broadly, not just the seniors, but also to all of our more vulnerable population. We needed to make sure that those that couldn't get out and couldn't get, to the services they needed were taken care of. I'm responsible for approximately 130,000 people. Take that very, very seriously. So we started off, the first thing we did was we declared a state of emergency back in April. This was a way of highlighting and elevating the issue so people understood the severity and took things very, very seriously. It was something we did not take lightly. It was a very strong tool, but again, it did really raise that awareness. When we talk about seniors and other parts of the community, we had to close our town-owned facilities and we had to cancel public programming. Well, these are things that a lot of these people rely on to get out of the house and to remain active. So we had to find other ways. Obviously, we urged all residents to stay home, and we, setting an example, had all of our staff working from home all that we could. Some of the things that we helped with some of the seniors, especially some of those in hospital, was we had a program where we had the community donated iPads and tablets and all those type of devices so that they could have those video conferences with their loved ones. So even though they couldn't physically get out, we were still able to give them that access, in those hard times. We also recognized, of course, the hospital and caregivers and the need of support. So we encouraged our Ajax-based businesses to donate any personal protective equipment they could, along with disinfectants, sanitizers, meals. And we had some community groups that really took that up as well and took that out to our seniors and took that out to our more vulnerable. We organized things like parades and vehicles, signage expressing support. And we did a lot of things like I just participated in one last week of an 80th birthday drive by, and we had another one, Louise Johnson, one of our own bomb girls who turned 97. Again, getting out and able to do those things without, but do it differently through COVID. One of the things we also did was start a $25,000 COVID-19 special response fund. We had money allocated that obviously we weren't going to spend on programs, so we reallocated that to these support groups that were delivering vital services to our seniors and our more vulnerable community. My own mayor's gala, that was, obviously we had to pivot and change that to an online format, and it was very well received. And due to the generosity of the many businesses and supporters in Ajax, we were able to raise $142,000 that I was able to divert towards those different charities that were being hit by losing donations for the pandemic, but really help those most vulnerable, like the seniors and like those that rely on things like food banks.
Correct.
So Feed the Need Durham, for instance, Horizon House, domestic abuse increases when you have during a pandemic. Durham Children's Aid and Community Care Durham, which does a lot of work for seniors, and the Meals on Wheels programs and things like that, just to name a few. We initiated the Hygiene Hub at our community center to help unsheltered people have access to washrooms and showers and food and clothing and health services as well. So there's just a lot of things that we did to really reach out and help, because those, and not just seniors, but all of our vulnerable community need that help, and we need to make sure that we are there to support them. So those are a few of the things and why I felt that was important. I hope I've answered that question.
Absolutely. And Mayor Collier, I think it's so important that you've circled repeatedly around the aspect of the people coming together and the process around it. We've spoken about this in other sessions around people, process, and technology. And, we are in a cybersecurity environment. The way in which you've brought not just the practitioners from the IT side, but you've brought practitioners from the not-for-profit sector, practitioners from healthcare together to deliver services. And I want to just park that to the side and go to Carol and sort of come to her mandate with the Amanda Todd Legacy Foundation, which is around awareness. and creating a sense of, or building further communication bridges so that people know of services that are available to them and expanding the types of services. I've always held this belief that a candle loses nothing by lighting another one. Would you agree that, sort of stemming from what Mayor Collier said, that the pandemic has allowed us to realize new and improved mechanisms to deliver services and awareness around programs like mental health? Carol?
Yes, I think having the pandemic arise in our world has given us an awareness of what we need to do to move into the future. And technology has been there, and we've used it previously for communication. But I think after states of emergencies and things closing down and people working at home, we've learned to utilize the technology to, I guess, benefit us more in the world of education, in the world of health, in the world of just awareness about different things. And I know that my legacy as a nonprofit, we used social media in order to get messages out, to get educational learning tips out, to inform. And I've noticed that there is, a broader viewership now and more interaction because people are at home, and there's still that information gathering that people need and that people want, because going to the public library or going to meetings or having information nights isn't possible right now because of the pandemic. So finding other ways to learn. And so using the technology and social media and whatever else you need to do is present. However, there's a big learning curve. I was just talking to Mayor Collier earlier about how we use technology prior to COVID-19 and what it might look like moving forward. And I'm in the education sector in British Columbia. And of course, when COVID hit and schools were shut down, we had to, of course, continue the education aspect and teaching our young learners and our vulnerable learners, because they're the ones that need specific specialized education. And just being able to provide it, being able to teach it to others so that they could provide it, it was just a huge learning curve, which has increased the stress levels of children, of parents, of educators, and beyond. So when we talk about mental health, it's a huge component of life right now in different ways. It affects people different ways. And of course, there are those who are leaders who can, and that's why we're all sitting here, right? Who can make the shifts and make the changes in order to continue, to make this continuum continue, and decrease the amount of stress and anxiety that comes with learning, that comes with using technology. And just like Shaun had said, in my community, we have done a really good job, my mayor in my city, in terms of vulnerabilities. And I think that I have learned so much about the vulnerabilities, the vulnerable homelessness, the food insecurity, and what we need to do as people in order to make it better.
Yep.
We're here to decrease the mental health.
Yep. Carol, thank you for that. And I think both yourself and Mayor Collier have really emphasized the point of no individual is an island, and you need to surround yourselves with the right resources while you lead your community through certain challenges. I want to take this aspect of challenge and bring the conversation to Medha, who's joined us here in this beautiful studio here at the St. Francis Center. Medha, for a lot of companies, especially those in the healthcare space, yes, you can partner with the town of Ajax, you can partner with not-for-profit foundations, you can work closely with Carol to deliver seminars, to deliver awareness programming. But at the end of the day, as a private sector incorporation, as a digital healthcare firm, innovation for many companies has become a matter of survival. For you, it became a matter of existence. You realized very quickly that the services that ConnexHealth provides now has to pivot to a virtual environment. How did all of these players come and support you? What was the role of the town of Ajax? And what was really your thought process when you went down this path of saying, I'm going to stall on some of my in-person services, which, by the way, you launched at the town of Ajax, but you're going to move into virtual space? How did siberX, for example, help from a security perspective? What was the support that you got during this challenging time?
Frankly, for us at ConnexHealth, we wouldn't have been able to get where we are without the support of the town, without the support of Durham College, without support of Medha and the siberX team, because all of you played a big part. Mayor Collier supported us by giving us some grants that we could pass along to our clients, which at the end of the session we'll announce further into, but that was something. Not also that, the support I've had from the town from beginning. If there were any questions, his team was always available to answer them. The team at Durham College has helped us pivot and develop our portal.
Yep.
So that was the great help. siberXchange, and again, the team at Durham College has helped me learn more about cybersecurity and what's needed to provide these sessions safely.
Right. And I think that aspect of providing these sessions safely, especially the virtual mental health piece, is something that I want to get into a little bit deeper. When you are delivering mental health services online, there are certain aspects that have to be taken into account. And I'll start off with you, then go to Carol, and then come back to Mayor Collier, because I think Mayor Collier would also be interested in learning some of this perspective as well. Delivering these services virtually online meant that you had to take into account a lot of privacy aspects that previously you wouldn't. For example, I think you mentioned to me that while delivering care, it could only be one-to-one. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you managed to create some security innovation and privacy innovation while delivering virtual mental health?
So some of the things that we worked on quite a bit was how do we make our sessions secure? Yeah. So one of the things was, as you mentioned, one-to-one sessions. Yep. We had to make sure everything was encrypted, no personal data was being shared. Also, we had to train our care providers to make sure that they are in a secure and safe environment. Yeah. Simple thing, they can't be doing this in their living room with their family members around them.
Right.
Because that is breach of privacy at some point.
Right.
So we had to train our clients as well as our care providers on basics. Not sharing the link on social media was one of the bigger ones. Yeah. So there was some small steps and some bigger steps that we took. But more than anything else, we increased our auditing to make sure, again, our safety is met.
Yeah. So I think this aspect of now you were able to now communicate and talk to mental health caregivers about a topic that typically they probably would not have been engaged on. This aspect of doing a privacy impact assessment. How many people are in the room when you're delivering a session? Are you taking what shot or what angle is your camera coming from? All of these opened up new communication areas and new opportunities to make security in healthcare not just one person's language, but everybody's communication tool. And just on that, I'm going to come back to Carol. And Carol, please forgive me if this question is a little bit challenging, but it's one that I want to see your perspective on, and if you can help me think through it. We're in this situation right now where a lot of care has to be delivered online, not necessarily because we can do it, but because you don't have any other option. Many services are now being conducted entirely remotely. Would you say that we have the right safety mechanisms in place to ensure both caregiver and care recipients are protected online, or is there more that we need to be doing?
Well, I think that Medha covered a lot of that with the security and the privacy and the one-to-one. And even in the education sector, we talk about, when we're having virtual classroom sessions and meetings, are they secure? And one of the topics that came up in conversation in the education sector was, where is the data being stored? Yeah. And to me, that's really important. The majority of the world doesn't understand all those security measures that are needed for privacy. But when you're talking about virtual telehealth care, and maybe even documents being shared, it's really sensitive. So these sensitive things need to be protected. When you're talking about comfort level, and I can speak honestly that since COVID, I have had my psychology appointments through Zoom, through virtual care, and there are people who love it, and there are people who don't love it because they find it hard. They want the face-to-face. They want the, being able to be in the same 10 by 10 room because maybe it's a comfort level. But personally for me, I love my virtual mental health care, only because I don't have to stress about driving the 45 minutes there and then driving the 45 minutes home after maybe a tough session. I can say what I want, and my home is my comfort zone. And so I am free to share what I need in my setting. So I see a huge, and it's going to, in order for it to evolve, it's going to take time, and it's going to take some convincing to some people. But moving forward, virtual healthcare and virtual mental health care, I think is a must. It's very much needed. And how we, I guess, convince others that security and privacy thing will be something that people will need to be assured of, that their information that they've shared is safe, that it's, if it's recorded, where is it going to be housed, or if it's not being recorded, to ensure that to the person that it is not being recorded. So there's all these details that probably will evolve, but technology keeps advancing. So, to default settings. So we as people who provide the service really need to also learn to ensure that safety is utmost.
Yeah, and Carol, I think it's so important that you've brought this point up about how we manage vendors as well, because this was a similar theme that came up in the previous session, but also in my conversations with Medha as we were going down this path. It was this aspect of, let's not be afraid to fail. Let's be afraid not to try. And at least you try with the right measures in place. And these measures sort of have been a signature of something from the town of Ajax, where you've created the right environment for innovation. Mayor Collier, I'm just going to ask you to hold for another 2 minutes while I go back to Carol and bring up a question which I hopefully can do justice to. And that is this aspect of, you may have heard it being said quite a lot in common speak, that people have said the next pandemic after COVID-19 is going to be a mental health one. Can you comment a little bit about, the audience wants to know, is that Medha focused specifically on mental health when there were a plethora of services that she could have, but she focused on mental health. I believe the stats are 1 in 5 persons in Canada will experience some episode of mental health. Would you agree that as a result of the pandemic and hyper-digitization, the issues around mental health and the situations or the cases of mental health will likely increase significantly?
I think the research has already shown that there has been an increase in mental health in terms of depression, anxiety, social isolation. There's pros and cons of, or pluses and minuses of what COVID has instilled, and using the technology. The pros of technology in COVID are it's increased use of technology. People have created ways to have interactions virtually. People have come to know others better because the conversation might be deeper online than it might be in person for some. But there's a lot of negatives also with mental health and technology, the increase in maybe bullying, the increase in shaming. We're more on social media, and so the comments on people's posts may be positive, but I've seen really negative ones, people taking images and sharing them or videos. Those are all negatives. And then with young people, I focus on young people, but it's adults also, and even our seniors, right? And the fear is we may become too reliant on our technology. And when COVID, if and when it starts to, we can get back out there, how do we pull back from technology and go back to social face-to-face interactions? Life will definitely be different. But with more people, I'm going to say, watching TV, watching movies, watching their screen time comes the effects of, I believe that sometimes overuse of technology rewires your brain. It rewires it maybe in not so great a way. But sleep deprivation, isolation, you can't leave your home, more anxiety, more depression, fear of going out, fear of talking to people face to face. Introverts are loving this COVID time because they're at home and they're doing their thing that they like with no judgment, right? And so you come to, and young kids are video gaming and they're chatting and they're finding social media apps and making new friends. And my thing with online safety is define a new friend.
Yep.
Right? We talk about predators and people you don't know and stranger danger and all those things. A part of what's missing right now, if you want to go into, like, it's all about mental health because it can escalate. We'd have to talk, I think the last time we talked on 1.0 was about prevention, intervention, and reaction. And we don't want to get into the reaction phase. We want to be in the prevention phase. And having school not in, these kids are not getting that conversation about online safety and what to do and what not to do. And sometimes SROs come in and they talk to groups of kids. That's not happening right now. So we are missing a piece of education for the kids and possibly the parents on what to do and what not to do online. Sorry, I diverged a bit, but
no, I think it's an important element of the realities that someone like Mayor Shaun Collier has to face with, because now the community is faced with a whole bunch of challenges, and it's not just businesses alone. Your seniors are faced with differences and challenges. Youngsters are faced with it as well. Closures of parks, for example, can create a sense of anxiety, so on and so forth. So there are multiple reactions mentally to what we're experiencing as a result of this isolation. And this is where I want to sort of U-turn back to Mayor Collier and say, despite all of these challenges, Mayor Collier, you and I have had this conversation all the time, is that innovation is not about change, it's about consistency. And you've kept this consistency going about the role Innovation Village is playing or will play in bringing in companies that can provide, not just generate profit and create jobs, but can provide for impact in the community. Whether you were at municipal sessions, AMCO in Ottawa, so on and so forth, you've been talking a great deal about investments in not just digitization, but digitization in healthcare. Recently, Mayor Ford was in town with an investment in physical capacity and long-term care health beds. But you've consistently pushed this narrative of Innovation Village being this consistent driver of new technologies with impact. Can you talk to us a little bit about the conditions with Innovation Village and how you're continuously attracting companies like ConnexHealth to come and experience and deliver services in Ajax?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I just wanted to follow up quickly on Medha's comment about not so much healthcare, but at the beginning of this, one of the things, and Carol brought it up, we were speaking before this session about the use of technology, and this was not something we'd used before.
Yep.
And it wasn't even actually something that was allowed to be used under the Municipal Act in the current setting. We were allowed to have a teleconference, but you still had to have the quorum, the majority of people physically in the room. So even in order to hold these things, and I think this may be similar to healthcare as well, is the actual policies had to be examined and changed. And I want to thank our provincial partners for being so quick to recognize these when they're brought forward and make those changes. I mean, I reached out to our MPP, the Honorable Rod Phillips, Minister of Finance. He's our Ajax MPP, right away about this restriction in the Municipal Act, recognizing right away that we're going to have to make a change. He in turn reached out to Minister Steve Clark of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and it was done right away. And when we talk about how this is affected, it's actually, I think, made a lot of things very, very efficient. And one of the things Carol and I were talking about as well is, you're in Vancouver, I'm in Durham. Getting you here is a challenge, right? It incurs airfare and incurs hotels, meals. Well, these are things that, as a municipality and as government, having these efficiencies has actually worked very well and been able to make us free to be able to pivot and address some of these important issues very quickly. And actually, it's identified so many economic benefits. Like I said, not having to incur all those costs on a municipal level, we can pass those on to the taxpayers. So I reached out to the minister again, and that change in the act has been made permanent. So we'll be able to continue electronic meetings and that type of thing, even after gathering restrictions have been lifted, because there are those efficiencies there, and it is helping us run our business and do that. So I just wanted to add that on. I think you probably have to do the same as far as healthcare, make those changes to policy, and the province has been very, very quick to respond to those. To Innovation Village, we are going to have to change that too. I mean, I'm very glad to have ConnexHealth as one of our first tenants in Innovation Village, and we're very glad to do whatever we can to try and embrace and support these new technologies. But now, with gathering restrictions and with the new normal, I'll call it, we're going to have to look at ways to change this model that we haven't even really established yet, and we're already going to have to change it to a way where we can still promote technology and work with partners, but do it with the restrictions that we have in place. And we're not sure how that's going to work yet. We're still putting together our economic plan as far as the rollout of Innovation Village. So there's still a lot to go on that, Ali. We're going to keep doing what we can. Like, for instance, you guys are right now in St. Francis Center, which is one of the buildings that we will be using for Innovation Village. And the building was empty, but it made, all our programs were canceled, but it makes sense to provide it for this event so we can still keep things moving forward. Even though we can't actually be there physically, we're still able to change and still move still keep our eye on the big picture and still able to move these events forward in the new normal.
And I think that building of community, as we've said repeatedly on the siberXchange, is that if you want to go fast, you can go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And that's kind of the messaging that we're seeing coming out of Ajax. I will weave in a question that we've got here, and that is, we've understood that, yes, amidst the pandemic, it's been a matter of existence. It's been a matter of, I guess, to some survival, but I like the word existence more, that we've had to innovate in order to get things done. And by innovation, it's not just about flashy and glamorous technology. It's about changes to policy. It's about changes to legislation. It's about changes to how we do business, which is where two questions have come to you, Medha. And that is this aspect of one is on cyber insurance and privacy, which I'll sort of manage between you and Carol. But the other question is that besides the virtual mental health piece, you also realize that a lot of seniors were now, since a lot of your PSWs could not go into the home. They couldn't. When you launched in Ajax in January, you had a lineup of PSWs ready to service the community. Mm-hmm. Now they couldn't go into the homes. In February, there was fear. In March, it was legislation that they cannot go in now. You pivoted to another service as well, and obviously had to go slow on your PSW movement, but you pivoted to virtual care and delivery of medications. And you started engaging with pharmacies. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you did this? And I know at the end we'll talk about how Ajax supported it, but let's talk a little bit about how you made this shift and the silver lining that you realized. Medha?
So, thanks, Ali. That's a great question. What we noticed was during this pandemic, a lot of our most vulnerable weren't able to get out to get their medications. the medications that were being delivered to them were not being delivered using the right protocol in place. People handling these medications weren't trained to do so. People also did not realize the severity of handling someone else's prescription.
Right.
So in order to mitigate that, we partnered with a company called Deliver North, and we've got our pharmacy solution, all that form now. And what we've got is we got our own set of drivers, we've got our own app, our own portal, where pharmacies have full control. They can track the medication delivery. All our drivers have been trained on how to handle medication properly, what are the pros and cons, and also we make sure that they are abiding by all provincial, government, and all the other regulations, including privacy.
Right.
And beyond all that, they are insured. So we are making sure everything is taken place before the delivery happens.
What is the importance of this aspect that you mentioned around them being insured? How, I mean, we get the importance, so I guess I'll retweak that question a little bit that we've received, and that is not necessarily the importance of the insurance, but was it challenging having this conversation now? Because this is a new form of business, especially when it comes to healthcare. How did insurance providers take to it? What were some of the supports that you needed from the cybersecurity community in order to position yourself as you know how to deliver the service, and it's coming from a faculty of strength?
So one of the things we had to do was make sure, again, having those audits done.
Right.
And one of the things, I do want to put a disclaimer here, I'm not an IT professional. I'm a healthcare professional.
Right.
So for me personally, I had to learn about cybersecurity. I had to learn about what kind of audits need to be done. And that we got in collaboration with the Center of Cybersecurity at Durham College, as well as with Medha and the siberXchange team, was we had to learn those concepts.
Yep.
And then implement those audits and make sure that we are abiding by the HIPAA regulations, make sure we are abiding by all the privacy regulations. And more than anything, when we developed, we made sure we developed based on privacy by design concepts.
Right.
So we built it into our platform.
Yep.
And those were some of the things that when we went to get insurance, we had to talk to our brokers and our insurance underwriters, and we had to explain that we are doing all these pros and cons, and we know the risk, and we are doing everything we possibly can to mitigate them.
Makes sense. And I think that aspect of privacy by design, zero sum versus positive sum, et cetera, are all conversations that came up to the fore as a result of this pandemic. You had to, as you had mentioned, is that this aspect on doing privacy impact assessments, you were probably looking at doing that sometime in November 2020. You had to, as Satya Nadella says, 2 years worth of innovation and transformation happened for you within 2 months. And I want to take this aspect of privacy impact and legislation, et cetera, and come to Carol again. Carol, this aspect of delivering services online and the terms and conditions around which they're delivered, the confidentiality, so on and so forth. Can you talk to us about some best practices around how to structure the privacy agreements and how to structure the confidentiality agreements when we are caring for folks online? And often, and there's a bit of a statement that's been made on this chat, which is, not just, caring for them online, often we're caring for them in the areas where they've suffered abuse. In these platforms, in these mediums where they suffered abuse, we're now caring for them in those very same platforms. What are some of the best practices around privacy and confidentiality that we should be adhering to in our development of technology?
I believe, we have to gain trust, right? Because of some of the, whenever you see a news article based on technology, it's because something's happened. Someone's gotten, companies' information got hacked, and all your personal information of all the users have gone out. So we have to gain trust of the end user, and that will take time. When you talk about virtual mental health care and with the age gap, there's if you're under 18, you're a minor. So how will those meetings be coordinated? How will they be structured? Ensuring that best practice that the mental health provider at the other end with ConnexHealth are they a trained person, or they are a professionally educated person.
Right.
Those things are really important to know, because a trained person versus a professionally educated, there's different levels of knowledge, different levels of training, different levels of academics involved there, right? And then someone may also still have their regular medical practitioner. So will any information, can it be transferred to your family doctor or whatever it may be? Those are all things that we sort of have to think about in terms of this new way of practice.
Yep. I think it's crucial, that aspect of transparency and how much you tell the service recipient about what it is that they are receiving, and the controls that are in place to ensure that if something goes wrong. I guess, Medha, the onus of responsibility also now lies on you to develop pathways in which, if there is a breach, how quickly do you respond in, adhering to certain frameworks, so on and so forth. Again, Medha, I'll come back to you, and this is not necessarily a question that we've received live, but more of a question that's sort of percolating in my mind based on some of our previous discussions as well. And that is something that you mentioned about when it came to delivery of products and access to making sure that people are delivering correctly, so on and so forth. How much has the world of training been impacted for you? And are you seeing now that as a result of this sort of almost an ability now for people to be more comfortable using video conferencing, have you seen more requests for senior groups, young groups? I believe you're working with Community Living York South. Have you seen more requests for people now asking for access to you, access to training, and access to more education?
One of the things that did come out of this pandemic was the change, the shift in mentality, where people are now accepting virtual training more easily than they were back in January. It's more acceptable. And thus, yes, we do see an increase in request of our sessions. So we, as you said, we've been working with Community Living. We are going to be doing a session with Autism Ontario soon. So we are working with different organizations and providing different sessions to help our communities.
Yep.
But at the same time, there has been more openness, even from senior community. Like, we've been doing a lot of training for seniors in cybersecurity, just basic on how to be safe and how to navigate. So those are some of the things where we've seen more willingness from the community to learn and adapt to online options that are available.
Makes sense. And Mayor Collier, I'll weave you into this as well. And that is, I said this at the start, is you have to be in a position where you're listening to understand and not necessarily listening to reply. How have you made sure that community needs have been able to be gathered and that you're able to sort of look at what the community requires and then respond accordingly? Have you been using stuff like, I know that you mentioned that on Fridays you were doing some coffee with the mayor sessions, you've done other engagements as well. What have you been doing to make sure that people now don't just feel that they can just say something in a suggestion box, but genuinely feel that they have a voice?
Well, being transparent and accountable is very, very important, and I've really made that part of my mission, is to make sure that I'm always accessible. I mean, my only phone number is my cell phone number, and that's the number that's published. And often, residents will call and be surprised that I actually answered the phone. They think they're going to get my assistant, but no, I actually am reachable, whether it be that or emails or whatever else. So I get a lot of my feedback that way. There was a little bit of talk about social media at the start of this session, and that it's good and it's bad. The online bullying part and is obviously the bad part, but the good part is it makes it easy for people to just post those issues. I would prefer them to reach out to us directly, because sometimes we don't look at Facebook or Twitter right away, and if they want prompt action, reach out directly, and that's sort of the message we're putting. But we're just trying to listen. So we've held a number. First of all, we're part of the Durham Region Business Recovery. Our economic development team works with them. We're very involved with the boards of trade, so we're getting a lot of feedback on them. We've held a number of online sessions, not just for business, but for residents as well. You talked about the coffee chats that I started on Friday afternoons,
Yep.
just Zoom calls. My schedule is posted online every Monday, so people can see what I have on and who I'm meeting with and what I'm doing. And part of that on the Friday is the Zoom link for the coffee chat, so people can just come and bring any issues they have or ask any questions they have. And we've stopped those now for the rest of the summer because a lot of people have been away, so there's not as much uptake. But we will put those back in the fall. So we've been listening, and I do put out a video message almost every Friday throughout all my social media accounts to update residents on what's going on, the changes that we're making. When we're entering phase 3, people automatically think, well, the community centers will be opening. Well,
Right.
the community centers aren't opening. One of the things that we did was, instead of hiring in operations to cut our grass and pick up litter, instead of hiring all the seasonal and contractors, what we did was, with our rec centers closed, if you're the guy that drives a Zamboni, or you're the pool operator, or you're any of those people, well, you don't have a job to do. So we've redeployed all those staff out, and they're the ones who are cutting our grass and picking up our litter and taking care of our maintenance. It takes time to redeploy. It also takes time to bring them back.
Yep.
So that's how I've been getting the message out to people, is through those videos on the Fridays as well, just to keep those lines of communication open. One thing, Ali, I did want to talk about
Sure.
quickly was the program that we put together for business, and I'm just trying to find it in my notes here. But our business recovery unit, or business recovery plan that we put in place, and we were one of the first municipalities to actually do that. So this again was more towards business, but it's one thing to try and attract business. It's another thing that we have to do to, just as important, support and encourage and assist through these, uncharted waters. And, again, it was through listening to what the challenges were that we were able to develop these 20 policies going forward to help address the things we need to do to open safely, still allow the economy to open, but still
Right.
make sure things are safe for everybody.
Yep. And I think it's really interesting to note the fact that you've underscored that there have been impacts financially. You've had to pivot in different ways, but more importantly is this aspect of, when it comes to transparency and accountability, the pandemic has kind of pushed us to now, push out our schedules through social media, use other mechanisms that previously we wouldn't use in order to communicate, and now this sort of becomes second nature to us. And we've adopted new statuses and new principles in our work that make us, for lack of a better word, more reachable, and people that we can converse with even more. I do, however, want to now go into a subject that has come up a couple of times in the chat, and I do want to thank the siberX team again for making this so simple to oscillate between different screens for myself as a moderator, and that is the impact of finances. Carol, I'll start with you, then go to Medha, and then come back to Mayor Collier, because he's made some investments possible in healthcare, and that's sort of where we'll have a bit of a soft landing. And Carol, the question, and I'll read it verbatim to you, is how can innovation investment be maintained when local governments are facing deficits and cuts to non-essential services? That's the question that's been posted, and I want to sort of bring a little sub-question to that and target it specifically to you. We say that empty pockets don't necessarily come in your way, empty hearts and empty minds do. But the reality is that to some extent you do need access to funds in order to, for example, access virtual mental health. You need access to funds in order to access remote specialists in whatever area of healthcare. How have you been trying to work, or at least advocate for more funding into these kind of services?
I think this wraps around the conversation, or what I was saying earlier, is to, like, for now, you've got Ajax, who is your key city that you are working with, and making it work. And once you get all the kinks out of and having it flow smoothly, then it can be talked about and told to the next city. So it needs to branch out. Getting more funding is having the conversation with your province, the provincial the people, the education, the mental health, the health ministry in your province to, and eventually federally, to ensure that this is good practice, that this will work, that care is given in a timely way, that it's more cost effective, that it isn't taking, there's less wait times, and with less wait times and with proper care, individuals that are going through, that are suffering, may not end up in the emergency room, taking up, like everything incurs dollars, right? And so having expedient care will effectively save money in the long run and be able to support more individuals going down the road. I really believe that the provincial funding needs to get on board with this and see the benefits. Because when I see, each city, each town, each municipality doing it, it's just reinventing this whole wheel all over again. Start big, start big or go home. Yep. That's just my thought.
Yeah. And I think that raises another important aspect around how we share some of our best practices, but more importantly also how we calculate. And for good or for bad, a lot of our decisions are, and Mayor Collier will also sort of attest to this further, is really measured upon a quantitative basis. From a mental health perspective and a virtual mental health perspective, as I mentioned earlier on, not only do we see that 50% of Canadians at some point will have some element of mental health that needs attention, but there's also an economic impact to this. And that economic impact is translated into people not going into work, people skipping out on school for that matter, people engaging in certain activities that result in additional layered costs. So we need to factor in all of those economic elements to it, which takes me to you, Medha, is you obviously have a business to run as well. I mean, you've never hidden away from the fact that you are a private digital technology firm. How did you, when you had to go out and say, we have these virtual care services, can you talk to us a little bit about how you priced it and how you had those conversations with potential clients on how you would help them access this in a financially sustainable model? And then let's talk a little bit about how Ajax played a role in both the virtual care, mental health, and virtual pharmacy deliveries. And we'll have you and Mayor Collier sort of talk a little bit about that, and then we'll come back to concluding comments with Carol. Medha?
Before I go into that, one of the things that I do want to say is what Carol brought a few minutes ago was prevention is always better than reaction.
Yep.
And when we are in reaction, unfortunately, it costs everyone more, not only our system, but individuals, families, everyone. So what ConnexHealth has developed is we've developed services, and mainly we are targeting children or young adults with either physical or cognitive disabilities. And that's the area that we are providing mental health to right now. And the way we priced it, Ali, is because it's virtual, we don't have any overhead costs. So all of our money goes straight to basically the care providers and the clients. So to give you an example, our services are at least 20 to 30% cheaper than traditional services. And what we've been able to do with the help of the Mayor Collier and Town of Ajax is, in Ajax, we are able to give 5 families 3 sessions each of our support.
Right.
So that is something we've been able to provide. Another thing that we've been able to provide is if any pharmacies in Ajax or Durham region who want to try our pharmacy solutions, we can give them 2 weeks free, no-cost deliveries to help mainly support the most vulnerable.
Yeah. And I want to come to Mayor Collier to see how that was made possible and sort of the innovative thinking via which you do fundraising, so on and so forth, the not just thinking out of the box, but you've heard me say this a lot of time, the burning of the box. But before we go there, can you also talk about how, the silver lining that we're searching for in healthcare, as a result of now launching a delivery service for pharmacies, or as a result of launching virtual care services, you've also been able to create jobs.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
So there are different ways that we've been able to help the economy too. One of the things is in development. We've been able to hire a lot of students from Durham College to help develop our portal. We've also been able to get a lot of drivers on board to help do the deliveries. We've been able to get therapists and behavioral analysts who, unfortunately, for a while could not go to their traditional workplaces because they were generally in person, help us provide virtual mental health. So we've been able to support the community that way by giving different levels of care and different levels of employment to different people.
Fantastic. Mayor Collier, ConnexHealth has been able to not only create new lines of service, previously unheard of, they've been able to create some employment opportunities growing on a regular basis. As Medha mentioned, is that not only after launching in Ajax in January, they've now launched services in Uxbridge, in Coburg, in Waterloo, and they've expanded their reach quite significantly. How were you able to ensure that through your role as mayor, you were able to invest in these very important initiatives? And going back to the question we had earlier, is that as more and more non-essential services and funding gets rolled back, you still found a way to invest in initiatives as opposed to just, hey, we don't have the funds, we cannot do anything. You thought outside of the box, you burnt that box. Can you talk to us a little bit about how this pandemic got you to that environment where you were still able to do what many communities have not been able to do?
Sure, and I'll get into that in a second. I'll just sort of preview it with a little bit about our finances, because our main source of revenue as a municipality is through property taxes. We were hit quite a bit harder than many municipalities because we are a municipality that hosts a casino. So we receive approximately $8 million a year as the host for the casino, and that's gone with the closing of the casinos. As well, with the closing of our rec centers, that's about $7 million a year that's gone. So, but at the same time, unlike some other businesses, we're provincially mandated to maintain levels of service, whether it be police or transit or fire, EMS, maintenance, all those other things. So, and finally, we're not allowed to run a deficit. So it's a pretty difficult balancing act on how we do this. So when we have these requests for funding, our hands are really tied. We have an approved budget back in February. In our case, it's $78 million is our town budget, and that money is already allocated. So if you lose those revenue streams after the fact, it's pretty tough not to run a deficit. So we found efficiencies, but it doesn't leave funds free to put out into the community in a lot of different things. We did do some with the $25,000 COVID fund I mentioned, which was just recreational things that we were going to put on, like Trail Fest and other things that we didn't end up incurring the costs on. The other one I spoke with was the Mayor's Gala. And Medha, I think one of the things you were talking about was that one of the ones that we funded?
Yes,
with the
Mayor.
Delivery service?
Yes, you did.
Okay, because we had a $25,000 pot of money, but we had $100,000 worth of applications.
Right.
So after the original town 25,000 piece was done, part of the 142,000 we raised for the Mayor's Gala, I looked at those that were not successful in the original round, but still had a lot of merit on getting back into the community. And I remember when you were talking about that, Medha, I thought I recognized that, but I wasn't sure. But yeah, so we took some of that money as well and was able to use it to fund a few of the other projects that didn't make the first cut, and they've turned out very, very well. The other thing, though, is partnerships. We've worked very closely with businesses, and for instance, we've got companies like Gordon Food Services who provides for restaurants. Well, obviously, when restaurants were closed, they're not delivering all of their products. So in the case of produce, for instance, it would go bad. So we made arrangements for them, put them together with Salvation Army. So they've been providing some stuff to them. We had other companies approach us that had PPE. Companies like, they've asked not to use their name, but companies that had surplus and needed and were able to provide that. And we were able to put that out into, a lot went to the hospital. I arranged to have some going into people that did home care,
Right.
And things like that. So it wasn't all monetary. Same with the Hygiene Hub. When we opened the Hygiene Hub, we had so many donations, it exceeded the needs. So we were able to take that excess and again, redistribute it to other areas. So we've been able to help in other ways without having to go back to the taxpayer, because if we were to give cash, it would have to come from the property taxpayers who are experiencing financial hardship in other ways.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter, I guess, of pivoting. That's the common word, I guess.
Yep.
Just being able to change the way we look at things. And I'm very much about being solution based. So if something comes, I don't want to just say, no, we can't do it. I want to look at it and figure out, okay, maybe this doesn't fit right now. Like you said, burn the box, Ellie. Maybe this doesn't fit right now, but what can we do to make this work? And that's how we've been able to get around a lot of these things.
And it's about finding the right timing. Now, we have about 30 seconds, and before we close and I summarize, I do want to give the final say to Carol. And Carol, you've heard me say this a lot of times with a lot of respect whenever I request you to join a session. I've always held this, and I'll say it again, as I did at siberXchange 1.0, that it's in the darkest of nights that the brightest stars shine, and the star of Amanda has been shining ever so brighter with your initiatives. If folks wanted to get involved with the Amanda Todd Foundation, what are some ways in which they can get involved, and how can they reach you?
We have a website. It's amandatoddlegacy.org, and there's a contact button that comes directly to me. And so they can go. We have resources, and I need to add ConnexHealth and all this onto our website. Lots of different resources on, bullying, online safety, sexualized violence, mental health on our website that people can learn and ask questions about. So contactable through there. And you know what? It takes a village to make change, and good leadership, and not being afraid to learn from the mistakes that we make along our path. And I think this particular session has shown that we aren't afraid to try new and innovative things. And if we make mistakes, we just pick ourselves up and we just forge ahead and learn from them and move on to the next level. So thank you all for taking the time to be here and inviting me.
Thank you, Carol. I have 10 seconds to summarize volumes of hope into one or two sentences. And what I will say is, firstly, of course, thank you, Medha. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Mayor Collier. To repeat, as Medha mentioned, thank you for your support for siberXchange. If you are a pharmacy in Durham region or in Ajax specifically, you're looking to try out services to deliver medications, especially to seniors and those who are vulnerable, reach out to go to connexmatch.ca. There's a simple form that you can fill out and you can get set up. The one thing I will tell you about Medha, much like Mayor Collier, you can reach her directly on social media, but also on her direct line as well. Secondly, if you are looking to access some virtual mental health services and you feel like there's someone in need of it and need to have a conversation, there is access, especially here in Ajax, to some free services and, more importantly, to some financial planning services with the team at ConnexMatch, so that you can actually look at a long-term service as opposed to something that is very spasmodic, something that is catered to your needs. And of course, if you have questions for Mayor Collier, questions for Carol, she's on the board of ConnexHealth as well. They would be more than happy to reach out to you. I'll close by saying this, and you know that I'm infamous for closing on a powerful punch, and I'll try to do that in two steps here, and that is this aspect of don't ever underestimate the amount of change you can create by the partnerships that you have. To the world, you might be one person, but to one person, you are the world. And I kid you not when I say the steps that Mayor Collier, Carol, and Medha have taken, they're one individual, and they've meant the world to a lot of people, including my students and my team at Durham College. So I thank you all again for your time, and I look forward to chatting with you. I know in our future engagements with ConnexMatch, and Mayor Collier, we've always been in connection. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you for the wonderful facility, and I look forward to chatting with you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Thanks, Ellie. Glad to be here.